My name is David Hillard. One of the things I really dislike about conferences is when there's a big panel of speakers and the person chairing it just talks on and on and on in a meaningless way, so I've fixed that by losing my voice. As a consequence, I've been explaining to Carmen, who's speaking a little bit later, that I won't introduce anyone. I'm just going to point at them and allow them to introduce themselves. Actually, no, that's probably a bit unfair. I should at least play some role. I've come all the way from Sydney. I should do something. So today's series of Spark Talks or mini talks that will look at four very distinct areas that may be areas of unmet legal need that you haven't thought about or that you are interested in perhaps becoming more involved in. A range of very interesting topics. And the first one is on pro bono for wildlife conservation. Why, what and how. Our first two speakers are Anna Duron, the pro bono project coordinator at the Ashurst Brussels office, and Marika Somero, the pro bono coordinator in Skadden, Arps, and Flom's London office. Can I welcome you both, and good luck with the clicker.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone. We're going to tell you a little bit more about pro bono for wildlife conservation. And I will first set the scene. Anna will tell you a little bit how a successful project may look like. I'll give you an example of a conservation project the Skadden previously worked on, and then Anna will set how we are hoping to hopefully move forward in the future. So what is wildlife conservation? It focuses on protecting wild animal species and their habitats and ensuring that the nature is there for the future generations to enjoy. Illegal wildlife trafficking, on the other hand, involves the trade of living and dead animal species or the related parts of products, such as skins, bones, or meat. Not all trade in animals, wild animals, is illegal. There's thousands of species that are traded on the legitimate market as pets, as food, as leather. But it escalates into a crisis when an increasing part of the trade is illegal and sustainable, and it threatens the survival of the species in the wild. And we feel that directing pro bono resources to tackle the illegal trade is a really powerful way to direct pro bono resources towards ensuring wildlife conservation as well. At the international level, illegal wildlife trade is regulated by UN Convention on the international trade in endangered species of wild fauna and flora. And it ensures and tries to protect a list of endangered species that are protected by the Convention from overexploitation and killing. Obviously, some examples of illegal trade are very well known to everyone, I think. Such as the poaching of elephants for the ivory or rhinos for their horns. But I've provided a really mini sample of hopefully some of the other animals that are endangered as well, that maybe sometimes get less publicity as well. Despite the global efforts to protect these species, illegal wildlife trade is widespread, and it actually constitutes one of the major illegal trading activities alongside the trading of weapons and illegal drugs. Obviously, by its very nature, it's nearly impossible to give reliable figures of the value of the trade at the global level, but United Nations has estimated that at the global level, it may be worth up to £15 billion. Alongside that, the illegal fisheries catch is valued between 7.5 to 18 billion pounds as well. And obviously it's quite a big range, but as I said, it's nearly impossible to provide reliable figures in this field. Wildlife trade alone obviously is a major threat to many species, but it's made even worse by habitat loss, as well as other pressures such as human and wildlife conflict. At the other end, extreme poverty means that many communities see wildlife as valuable goods that they can trade. We've actually provided you with some news headlines from the past year, And I think you may be surprised to see how close to home some of these issues are. You can see that it was actually in Paris too. A rhino was killed and the horn was taken as well. So it doesn't necessarily always just happen, in Africa and Asia, the typical place that we would always think. Conservation and wildlife conservation is also related to sustainable development goals. They directly call for for states to take urgent action to end poaching and trafficking and the protected species as well. And separately, they call for the conservation and sustainable use of oceans and marine species. I think Anna will move on to tell you a little bit more about what a successful project may look like.
Good morning, everyone. Could you click on the following one? Okay. So the way we looked at it with Marika is that we wanted to see what kind of help lawyers could possibly give to support this kind of cause. And we had many discussions and we discussed this with many people. And as in, regular pro bono work, you have two angles of looking at an activity that you want to support or efforts of a certain cause. And so there's a typology that we set up like this. So you've got what we call the traditional expertise, is where you help an NGO or a specific cause simply by helping them function better. So it'd be the likes of, sponsorship contracts, leases, insurance, possibly giving them advice about data protection. So it's helping them function in a better manner. So that's one side that you can contribute to if you don't think you're comfortable doing something else. What we're really interested as well is the sector-specific expertise. It's where you don't need to be an environmentalist or an environmental lawyer necessarily. And in law firms, it's a very rare capacity to find anyway. But there are different ways of helping. And for instance, developing strategy, advocacy, seeing where pressure points could be found, politically, maybe, with the EU institutions. A typical example would be preparing a commission complaint against a member state, maybe not related to wildlife conservation, but that's one typical avenue, when you want to implement something. And then, obviously, you've got the axis of research, so helping collate data, case law, looking at different legislations. This is the more academic side of things, but this is also very helpful. And then there are different activities also, training of judges, prosecutors about legislation, for instance, in Africa. I don't know if anyone is here from, was it Lawyers Without Borders? Because they've developed a program whereby, I don't know if any of you were in the panel yesterday about trafficking, and the lady from Lawyers Without Borders had mentioned that there's a program they developed about training wildlife officers to survive cross-examination when they had to give evidence in court. And it's not specifically related to wildlife conservation, but it's an instrument to help them bring evidence and therefore to secure more convictions against poachers and traffickers of ivory. So these are different avenues that we were thinking of. And maybe just a little anecdote about this. How we came up with our topic is because and that's how we bonded with Marika last year at the PILnet forum, simply because we met at reception and with other people and we started talking about wildlife, elephants and Africa. And we just think that in our respective capacities, we would like to make a difference, and we thought that this would be an issue that would be interesting, at least for some of you, to help with. And there are many ways in which help could come. So these are kind of things that we think would be very successful. They're obvious. Next slide, please. So there are important considerations before you enter into these kind of projects. How do you want this to come about? The context. What do you want to achieve as a law firm or helping an NGO? How do you measure the success of this? Who do you want to work with? Do you want to work with other lawyers? Do you want to partner up with organizations? Obviously, the right partner with the right contacts it's supposed to be fun also. It shouldn't be something that's, soul-destroying. Timeframes, capacity, financial resources. So we're not completely naive in thinking that everyone will dedicate all their resources to helping sustain wildlife. But we just think that maybe there would be possibilities amongst you guys to possibly contribute to this. And then Marika will talk about one very successful pro bono project of Skadden.
Yeah, I'm very conscious that we're running out of time, so can we have just one more minute?
Yeah.
So back in
Yes.
Thank you. Back in 2011, Skadden assisted a small Scottish marine preservation organisation called The Coast. And the aim was to help them to campaign for a marine protection area around the Scottish Sea and to ensure the sustainability of the marine ecosystem around the Scottish Sea. The overfishing activities had threatened the island's marine animal survivals, and the situation had become critical. And Coast had actually lobbied with the Scottish government for over a decade to try and get them to implement this protection zone. But obviously, as a small community organisation, they didn't necessarily have the resources, to provide the critical sort of pressure on the government to make them implement that. And it was actually the main focus of Skadden's work, and it was led from our Brussels office. And the problem really was the EU directive on the marine strategy. It required Scotland to implement a network of these protection zones that they had failed to do. And it was actually Skadden's knowledge of the sort of internal workings and mechanics of the Brussels and how Brussels operates that helped Coast to lobby for the protection zone. And obviously, when it came to the negotiation table as well, Skadden's legal expertise, we were able to match the pro-fishing lobbyist who successfully, obviously, for over a decade had prevented and lobbied with the Scottish government to prevent them from implementing these zones. And fast forward in 2013, all the Skadden's and Coast efforts were rewarded, and Scotland finally gave in and decided to implement this protection zone. So I just wanted to give a really quick example how powerful pro bono support can be, particularly for small organisations as well, who don't necessarily have the resources and capacity to do this work, themselves. And Anna is going to...
Okay, so
do
10 seconds.
10 seconds.
So we had three main goals. So it was to raise awareness so that you're aware that we're concerned. And so if you're interested in tackling the same problems as us, then feel free to contact us. Inspire firms and lawyers. Well, that's it's a big inspiration, but I don't know if in 7 minutes we can manage. And also for firms to think carefully about what they want to do. You need to be strategic in the projects that you choose. As I said, we're not naive, but we think we can make a difference. That was really all we wanted to say, is that we're interested in this and we'd like to develop this. That's
Okay.
it. Thank
Sorry,
you.
you're taking about 12 minutes of the
No.
time.
It's well, I'm sure we can stay here all day. That will be fine. It's can I thank you for please thank both Anna and Marika for the presentation, and let that serve as a warning as to who you bond with at this conference. You may be asked to present with them next year. So
Yeah, it's very dangerous,
It's
who you
very
have drinks
dangerous.
with and commit to for doing presentations in the future. Yeah.
looking around this crowd, I'm sure there's been no drinking at all, so that will be fine. Okay, our next speaker is Szilvia Gyurko, and Szilvia is going to talk on the topic of pro bono child advocacy. Szilvia founded the Hintalovon Foundation, whose mission is to develop child rights projects in Hungary and in Central Europe. Please welcome Szilvia.
Do you hear me? Or yeah, okay. Then I prefer to speak this way than with. It happened maybe 10 years ago when I first met my child client, first child client in my life. I was just freshly graduated and I started working for an NGO dealing with victims of sexual abuse and domestic violence. She was 12 years old. Her name was Rebecca. and she was sexually abused by her parents, both parents, the father and the mother too. I saw the criminal procedure she was involved. I just experienced a lot of very harsh and very hard things. The judge, the prosecutor, the police officer, the forensic expert, the psychologist interviewed the child more than 10 times. The criminal procedure and more than 5 years, and at the end of this criminal procedure we failed this whole issue because there were no enough evidence and proof to say that that criminal case really happened. I just realized that through a criminal procedure it's really hard to protect the rights of a child, but I know that this is because of sexual violence, because it's a taboo, because it's so hard to handle this issue, and because there's only a few information given to the law students during the university, the law school, about this issue, domestic violence, sexual abuse, and all those stuff. But later, I also met several other child clients who lived with divorced family, who had custody issues, who had problems with schools, and I just realized that the problem is not in the criminal procedure. The problem is with the experts, the lawyers dealing with these issues, because they really there's a really strong lack of knowledge about child rights, the needs and the interests of children under the age of 18. However, we know that the first 18 years of our life is really dedicated. All the experiences we have in our first almost 2 decades can make an imprint in our life. We can struggle with the bad experiences, and we can vary for our strongness from the good experiences. So this is why it's really important. So I know that we have to do something with this, because every third child's parents just divorced. So the divorce is a really regular and usual issue. We have to be sure that all the child rights are protected during the divorce cases, the custody cases, all those stuff. And we also know that every 5th children in Europe, at least, are influenced by sexual violence. So they are victims of sexual violence, every 5th. So it's quite a huge number, and this number is based on a research of Council of Europe. So I know that we have to do something. We have to respect the rights of the children, because it's really important. And in that time, I met PILnet, and I just saw their logo, that justice needs advocates. And I just started thinking that not just the justice is important, but because all the prosecutors and judges know that what they did was justice, they provide justice, but the quality was the real issue. So I know that not just that justice needs advocates, but quality justice needs qualified advocates. So we have to qualify advocates for child rights. They have to know, they have to get better understanding of what it really means, the child rights, the child's interests, the basic needs of a child, and how we can respect these rights during the criminal procedure, or before that, or after the criminal procedure, the civil procedure, or in a child protection case. So this is why we invented in our small local Hungarian NGO a Child Rights Pro Bono Center. This is an initiative, it's a so-called clearinghouse, a pro bono clearinghouse. We're working together more than 26 lawyers. And at the beginning, we recruited them, at first, of course. We were searching lawyers who are interested in children's issues. We were not recruited lawyers who has children, because it's a mistake that we are thinking that everyone who has a child has an extra sensibility or something. I think it's not true, because everyone were children, so we have our own experiences in this field, and it's more important our attitude coming from our own childhood than our attitude and experiences coming from us as a parent or as a grown-up. So we recruited at first lawyers, and then we trained them. we provided them a 2-day training where we teach them on child rights, the Child Rights Convention of the United Nations, the commentars of the CRC. We also try to sensitize them on the most important issues like what is the trauma, how you can recognize a traumatized child, how you can identify a crisis, a traumatizing situation, how you can protect the child in a hard situation, and so on and so forth. So after the training, we got 26 lawyers working together. We, as the Fundacion, with 3 people, are filtering the cases. And this year, from March, we dealt with more than 100 child rights cases, and we successfully managed more than 60 cases, which is a huge number. It's a small step in Hungary, but it's a huge number for an NGO and for this cooperation, because we can show that not just pro bono work is important, but the quality of the pro bono work is really important. We also providing for our lawyers supervision. It means that every 6 weeks there is a psychologist who is dealing with our pro bono lawyers, because dealing with child rights cases is not easy. For instance, representing a sexually abused child in a court case, it's not easy, it can burn. But we wanted our lawyers to leave the comfort zone and doing something completely different and dealing with child rights, but we take care of them. So this is why we providing supervision by a psychologist, and we also providing continuous training for them. We call professors from the university, we invite professors from the ombudsperson's office, and we try to provide extra information and knowledge for our lawyers. So this is the idea I want you to hear. If you have any question, I'm here, and you can post your question, your dilemma, and whatever you want. And I hope that this model, how we set up this pro bono clearinghouse dedicated to child rights, can be a model and can be implemented in different countries. If you find a good NGO you believe in, an NGO in close connection with the children and parents and so on, and based on a know-how, you can invent something that can provide really help for the children. And just one experience, at the beginning of this year, we have a very hard case, a 16 years old child who was sexually abused by an uncle since she was 8. So it's an 8 years continuous sexual abuse. And one of our pro bono lawyers, who is generally dealing with financial issues, representing this child in front of a criminal procedure, working together, a psychologist working together with a social worker, a child protection agent. And on this Monday, we met a case conference, a so-called case conference, where every expert is sitting together and sharing thoughts and building up a strategy how we can represent successfully this child in this criminal procedure. And I just saw this lawyer, this 40 years old lawyer with a huge experience, just entering to our office like a law student. It's a huge package of the criminal code, the procedure code, and all these stuff. And she was so excited and so interested in this job that I believe that it is a way of, or a model of mutual benefit. So we benefit her work, and also she's benefited through this work and get some kind of passion and good experience, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Szilvia, for a really inspiring example of how, for change to happen, somebody needs to lead it. Congratulations on a really sophisticated and successful model of assistance. That's really inspiring. I may do the rest of this by way of interpretative dance, so we'll see how we go. Our next speaker is Carmen Pombo, the Chief Executive of the Fernando Pombo Fundacion in Spain, an organisation which promotes the legal profession's engagement with the rights of underprivileged people. And she's going to talk to us about legal empowerment of vulnerable women. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think I have a very tough job right now after these good presentations of my previous co-panelists, especially yours with such a passion and such a hard topic you're dealing with. So let me just give a brief presentation of what we do and what we do in the foundation. So I was a corporate lawyer before joining the foundation. I specialized in intellectual property, and the closest link to human rights that I found in intellectual property was health law. So patents in the health sector. But now I'm devoted fully to the foundation. The foundation is basically, Fernando Pombo was a lawyer himself, so it's a foundation of lawyers. And we're basically focused on or we want the legal profession to show leadership in the defense of human rights and access to justice and the rule of law. That's what we're trying to do. And the way we're doing it is basically through pro bono and university legal clinics. And we are facing, or we are oriented towards specific vulnerable groups, which are gender-based victims, the homeless, also forced migrants, and vulnerable patients. Those are like the specific vulnerable groups that we're addressing. We're also focusing a lot of efforts in engaging corporate lawyers in the issue of business and human rights. And because that is a specific issue that we think is basic towards reaching an engagement through the legal profession to the rights of the vulnerable, we are also spending a lot of effort and energy in social entrepreneurship, engaging pro bono lawyers and the legal profession in social entrepreneurship. So that's for the foundation. And also let me explain you that the foundation has a name just dropped, which is not very important. We come from a law firm, a big law firm in Spain. Fernando Pombo was a founder of a big law firm in Spain, Gomez Acebo and Pombo, but we are a foundation. So although we work together with many lawyers from a big law firm, and we do the pro bono the pro bono services. So we act sometimes as a pro bono director, or Anna actually runs she's the pro bono director of the law firm. We are actually independent as a foundation, so we have like a weird way of functioning. So my objective today is basically to explain you what and how through the legal profession we can actually help gender violence victims, and how gender violence victims, when they actually see a lawyer, it's very far away within their process of living violence. I think this is not the context to explain you what sort of violence can imply gender violence, but of course there is physical violence, which is the obvious that we think, but there is also psychological violence. You've got sexual violence, obviously. You've got economic violence, which is also dreadful. You've got symbolic violence. So there are very many different types of violence, which are very complicated also from the legal perspective, from the lawyer's perspective, to prove it in courts or to understand it when you're actually assisting the victim. And this is very relevant when you're a lawyer trying to do pro bono or trying to assist a victim, to know that gender-based victims are suffering many different types of violence, and this is very relevant. So how do we face this? Or let me go backwards. First, the types of violence is basically the what. The who is the woman, but the woman, it's not only woman. You also have children, right? You have girls, you have teenagers, and you have teenagers and girls, and you have women who are married or not. But you also have elderly women who suffer violence. You have migrants, irregular migrants, who are also more vulnerable. You have Islamic women who are also subject to specific violence, which is sometimes very complicated to understand. You have the issue of trans gender violence. You have the issue of Roma woman. You have the issue of physically or mentally ill woman. You have the issue of the disabled. So you have the issue of so many different kind of gender violence, no? who suffer this sort of violence. So now that we know the what and the who, let's go back to we're talking about violence, but woman we love, no? We actually love. So the title of this sort of spark talk was that woman love, woman fight, because we basically we run our families, we run our households, and we provide so much love from birth, from the beginning. We just love, we love. We love to love, we love to be loved, and we provide so much love, but we also suffer so much violence as well. No? So I really want to have within the whole presentation the message of love. And why we suffer this violence is often because we love. It's in the context of love that we suffer violence. So I just want this to be present all over my presentation, that we are suffering violence in the context of gender violence or domestic violence, depending on the jurisdiction, you call it differently. You suffer the violence because you love. Okay, I just want this to be present. Okay, you love as a wife, you love as a mother, you love as a granddaughter, you love as a friend. Woman love. Okay, so if you can pass through the next one. No, the previous one. The fight. Okay. Yeah, that one. So fight woman, no love. No, this is gender violence. So how do we approach as a lawyer gender violence? The way we've done it in the foundation is, first of all, because we are a small foundation, so basically we cannot give representation to women themselves. So we have, first of all, tried to approach the NGOs who we have found that are more professional, or the way we understand that what they're doing with gender violence victims are more better structured or better organized, and we see they're making a better impact. So we have basically identified those that are making a greater impact. And so once we have identified our strategic partners in the provision of services to those victims, and working with them and creating a strong established relationships, we have identified the most recurring issues with the victims, legal issues, right? So issues in connection with labor, with custody and family issues, with debts, because this is also very important. We were talking before about economical violence. Issues with health and mental health, which is very relevant as well, and this is an issue that not very often is treated duly in cases in connection with gender-based victims, and also with social excluded groups. And mental health is a very critical issue in gender-based crimes. Also with evidence is very complicated in gender-based crimes, and evidence in connection with new digital means, so all sort of evidence in connection with sexting or evidence, all new digital means. So what have we done? The way we have acted, and I don't have it near, but I'll show you later, is we created a guide with the most relevant legal issues in connection with gender-based violence. So this is a guide that we created that is now part of the obligatory material for the legal aid system in the Madrid Bar Association. And this is a guide that all legal aid lawyers in the Madrid Bar have to take before they can actually give advice to gender-based victims. So it's like a guide which puts the lawyer in the context of what the victim has when they actually come to a lawyer. And when the victim comes, has gone through already normally many years of violence. No, when they see a lawyer, it's really not the first moment that they have faced the violence. So they've gone through many things. And also bear in mind the love, okay? The woman loves, okay? The woman loves the guy, the woman loves the kids. The woman has to fight to cope with it, okay? And when she actually gets some energy and some strength, she goes and sees the lawyers, okay? And the lawyer is just there to help the woman, but she doesn't know everything that she's gone through. And she's suffering to cope with the job, and she's just, she just has to move on. 1 more minute, okay. So let me just go through just quick examples of cases where lawyers can help by means of business and human rights, by social entrepreneurship, by university legal clinics, by pro bono. In cases of custody with Roma kids, for instance, de facto, I think you're going to be touching Roma, but in Spain we have many cases of Roma kids. When a woman has suffered gender violence, normally the family of the man keep the children. So we have had situations where we have had to fight de facto to get the children to the mother. This is an issue, a legal issue that we have been fighting pro bono. Many companies have had, as a business and human rights issue, tried to approach or victims of gender-based crimes in order to help gender-based victims who have to have access to jobs in order to help them reincorporate to life and to have a new way of entering a new life. Also, let me explain you irregular migrants and those who are fleeing wars. It's very complicated when you don't have no one to report because you don't have the papers. So how can you actually do something against gender violence? Let me tell you the situation of we have a big problem in the southern border of Spain, in the cities of Melilla, Mount Gurugu. There's lots of problems about gender-based crimes and people being raped and trafficked as well in the Mount Gurugu. And so there we have important pro bono cases happening there. We have also big social entrepreneurship initiatives, helping social entrepreneurs employing gender-based victims initiatives, also through university legal clinics. Let me just explain you one specific case of a second opportunity act that was established in Spain, which is specific for people who are bankrupt. This act was obviously not intended for gender-based victims, nor for trafficked women or for socially excluded people. It was just for people who just had lost everything and who had many debts. What we did through first a university legal clinic and then through very perseverant pro bono lawyers was to use this with specific people who were doing prostitution and who, through this NGO with who we had partnered, is just try to get who couldn't keep this woman out of the streets. And the problem with them was that they had so many debts that they could not stop going out of the streets. So what we have done is this law, which was very nice on the papers and very nice for the government, but this law was not being used. And it was pretended to be used for individuals. And so what we have done is we've been working on this law to be used for once in their life, in their life, just for trafficked women, and we are proving that this is useful for them. Mm-hmm. So this is another example of how bankruptcy lawyers can actually help gender-based lawyers. Okay, right. So can you?
Actually, I'm going to have to ask. The last one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me just, here.
Sorry, yep.
Yeah. So because we're talking about fighting, love, fighting. So just one last conclusion. Can this fight, because women are just fighting. You have to fight to prove you have to fight and go through. So what I have to say is, can this fight be a lesson that a woman has to go through? Can this be something that can be related with love? Should someone have to go through this? And then can you move? So my conclusion is love woman, do pro bono, fight for woman, and do pro bono.
Carmen, thank you. So there is such a wide range of ways we as lawyers can make a difference to the victims of gender violence. Thank you so much. And our final speaker today is Judit, the senior lawyer at the European Roma Rights Centre here in Budapest.
Maybe I can just use this.
Yeah, sure.
one.
That's exactly.
Oops. Oh. Okay, so
Okay.
it works. Okay, so good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you for inviting us to this session and giving us the opportunity to talk about the pro bono rights for Roma. As David said, I'm Judit Geller. I'm a senior lawyer at the European Roma Rights Centre, and where during the last couple of years I have been litigating several human rights cases before domestic and international courts, including the European Court of Human Rights, UN treaty bodies. Today I have three objectives with this small talk. First is to introduce to the ERC work, our strategic litigation work for Roma, discuss our challenges that we are facing in fighting for the civil rights of Roma, and to get your pro bono support. So who are the Roma? I just would like to talk a bit about what is this ethnic minority that we are talking about. Roma is the largest ethnic minority in Europe. There are about 10-12 million Roma living throughout Europe today. But what kind of life Roma live? Well, not the kind of life that you would imagine for yourself. If you are a Roma, you are more likely to face violent crimes and abuse. Your life expectancy at birth is 10-15 years less than for non-Roma. You are likely to live in precarious housing conditions, mostly without water. You are facing at imminent risk of eviction. If you are a Romani woman, you might have been sterilized against your will. As a Romani child, there is a high chance that you will be put in segregated education, including segregated class. And if you're a Roma, politicians will use you as a scapegoat. They will call you an animal, inadaptable, or a criminal, or a threat to the society. So this is the kind of life Roma live in Europe today, and they face discrimination and social and economic exclusion throughout all Europe. So what are we doing as the ERRC? The ERRC is an international organization, and it was founded 20 years ago to fight against racism and discrimination against Roma in Europe. So we do that through strategic litigation, research and advocacy, human rights education, and media and communication outreach. So in other words, what we are trying to do is we are trying to stop school segregation, stop housing segregation, stop forced evictions. We try to prevent that Romani women are put in segregated maternity wards when they give birth, that Roma do not face violence, or if they do, state has an adequate and immediate response to that. And also we try to ensure that Roma have equal access to justice and effective remedies. So this kind of treatment that Roma are struggling from is not something new that we haven't seen in history before. We have seen similar treatment in the US, segregated, so African Americans were facing segregated schools, segregated housing. They were treated as second-class citizens.
and actually the American civil rights movement that inspires our work today as well, because during the civil rights movement many lawyers and attorneys joined this movement, and they were fighting for racial equality through the courts. So just for example, one example that we can really relate to, the Brown versus the Board of Education case, which brought the end of racial segregation in schools in the US. And if we look back, these lawyers and attorneys now are kind of heroes of the civil rights movement. So in fact, we are looking for these heroes for the Roma rights movement as well. And my question today to you is like, where are these lawyers for the civil rights struggle for Roma? Because the RSC and our lawyers, we have been working on the civil rights litigation of Roma for more than 20 years. And if you just look at a snapshot of our current caseload, it's around 200 cases throughout Europe before domestic courts and various bodies, and also the Strasbourg Court and UN treaty bodies. So we certainly need allies to do this work, because we have quite limited funding in terms of the EU countries. 70% of our fund goes for work outside of the EU. So we really need pro bono, and pro bono work would be, or legal help would be a great solution for that. Because Roma face discrimination today as well in the EU countries. So for example, we have cases of forced evictions in France, we have cases of school segregation in Hungary, disproportionately high number of Romani children are put in state care in the Czech Republic, and Roma are facing police brutality in Slovakia. We have several cases. So we are short of financial resources, and we would need your help to be able to continue our work and to fight for equality for Roma at the courts. But the problem is that the RRC have not been able to secure pro bono support in terms of legal representation so far. We have been able to secure some kind of pro bono support, meaning translation of judgments or doing some little legal research, but legal representation were not provided yet by any firms to our cases. The responses that we got normally is that it requires time commitment because litigation takes a long time. There are cost issues involved, of course, and also that the lawyers or attorneys at big law firms, they don't necessarily have the expertise that requires for this kind of litigation that we are doing. So my question today for you is that how we can make corporate lawyers and attorneys to join our work. We have heard very good examples like Szilvia's example, and maybe that can be an inspiration for us as well. But I'm also hoping to find these lawyers, and that you will help us to fight for equality for Roma. Thank you. And if you have any questions, you can email me or you can visit our website.
So what better way to finish